Hello, everybody. So Cortex 1.5 was shipped last week, I believe. And with that comes a lot of features that we've been talking about on the channel over the last couple months, but certainly over the last several weeks. And now with this release, the natural question is what will come in the next version, which will be obviously Cortex 1.6. I mentioned in a couple videos back that the plan is to ship that in another couple months. I'm trying to go no more than 2 months without a significant version, not necessarily a major version, but a significant version. So Cortex 1.6 in a couple months, and then Cortex 1.7 by the end of the year. Um, but before we get into any of that, I want to remind you all that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I run the Cortex Users Group. It's a time for you all, no matter what your stage in the Cortex journey is, to come talk to me, talk to other people who are using Cortex or looking at Cortex, and learn about what we're doing, our experiences, and maybe get a sneak preview at some of the stuff that we're about to talk about that will be coming in Cortex 1.6. I will say, though, that this week's user group probably not going to talk too much about any of the sneak peeks and any of the features that are coming in 1.6 because there just hasn't been time to make much progress on them. So anyway, what is coming in 1.6? Well, based on the title of the video, you might be able to guess at one of the things that we're working on. But I'm going to leave you hanging for just a second because I do want to address two of the features that we tried to release for Cortex 1.5 that just there's still a little bit of work to be done on that. So the first one is the one-step details feature. And you may have noticed that it's actually not visible in the navigation in Cortex 1.5. That is intentional. That is not a bug. It is technically an experimental feature that you can turn on. That is not documented. But if you want to turn that on, if you want to get access to that, come talk to me. There's links down in the description to schedule time on my calendar or to shoot me an email. And I can certainly get that set up for you and show you how to get access to that. The reason we didn't release that fully is because it's not quite the level of polish that we wanted it to be. Some of the steps don't show up in a very useful way. There's still some like nitty gritty details that are a little bit too exposed, a little bit more exposed than what you're used to in Cherwell. And it turned out that as we got into the deeper layers, there just wasn't enough time to get it to the level of polish that we wanted to have it. And since that was a requested feature by only certain folks, we figured it was better to wait until it was fully developed and fully polished rather than just rush to get it out to a bunch of people who hadn't really asked for it, weren't really needing it right now. Certainly, by the time people need it, it'll be there. Again, it's something that we're hoping to get into Cortex 1.6. The other one that we talked about, including in 1.5, was something for external business objects, external data sources. That ended up opening a whole can of worms, similar to what we had to deal with user management, because wherever Cortex is running is likely not going to have access to the external databases, external data sources, or at least not the same way, or at least we can't make assumptions about that. And that means that we're going to need to save those details somewhere, which calls into question the read-only nature of the database and that sort of thing. That's not something we want to get into lightly. We want to always make sure that the Cherwell data can remain read-only and if you need to customize the external data sources, if you want to activate that, or if you want to disable an external data source, you don't need to see it in your historical lookups. Um, we want to give you the flexibility of configuring that, um, again, without violating the read-only nature and the requirement that the Cherwell data hasn't changed since the last day you used Cherwell. So that's what's going on with that feature. Um, and again, that's something that I'm excited about. I'm excited about actually getting into that. I want to write the code. Um, I want to do that. I want to implement that. I'm excited about where that can go, and I just haven't had the time so far to to give it the treatment that I actually want to see. Um, and that would satisfy all of those constraints. So that'll be in there for 1.6, over the next few weeks. Um, but finally, we're setting our sights on um, all sorts of Cherwell versions. Um, so I started doing a little bit of research over the weekend, and I kind of assumed that with Avanti's push and even Cherwell's push before that, um, to get everybody on the newest versions, Cherwell had a push that it was the current major version, like the part before the first dot, um, and one version prior, and then I think they pushed it to kind of the minor version, so like 9.7 and 9.6 were supported as soon as 9.7 came out because I know lots of people were on previous versions, uh, and for a while, I think that actually worked. There were somewhere between 70 and 80%, maybe even higher, uh, customers who were on the latest version or maybe one version back, and very few on super early versions. That may have been limited just to folks who are on the subscription model that didn't have perpetual licenses. I don't remember. It's been, you know, 5 years or so since that was being talked about. I think that may have been presented at one of the CGCs back when those were still a thing. Um, so I kind of assumed that that momentum was continuing, but it turns out that, and this is purely anecdotal. I just went to a few folks' Cherwell instances, and on the portal you can pull down the help menu and see the Cherwell version, or on some of the newer versions on the login page it shows the version. Now I was expecting to see 2023.1 or even 2024.1. Some of the newer versions. I know I've seen chatter of people upgrading because of Avanti's new policy that versions are only supported for 18 months from their release date, um, which means that you're probably on an unsupported version right now. Chances are good. And even if you upgraded now, you would still have to do another upgrade in order to be fully supported up until end of life. My recommendation, don't wait that long. I know most of you are already evaluating what platform you're going to go to next. If you haven't already decided, lots of you have already done that as well. So that might not even be a concern. You might need to upgrade just to be supported for the next, however long until you're fully migrated, or you might be close enough to finishing your migration that you don't even need to bother upgrading. So for some of you, you'll have to upgrade two more times. For some of you, you'll have to upgrade one more time. And for some of you, you're just going to forego upgrading and just say, we're good, we're moving off Cherwell, as soon as possible. Um, but in any event, I expected to see 2023.x, 2024.x, um, but no, I saw versions like 10.1, 10.2, and these aren't just on-premise customers uh, who might be using a perpetual license or something like that. I know for a fact that there are some people out there who have perpetual licenses to Cherwell, got them back in the 4 dot whatever days, and said, "We're good. This does everything we need it to. We don't need to upgrade. We're totally fine with that." Um, so they're on super old versions, but we're talking hosted customers who are on 10.1, 10.2. I think I saw a 10.4, maybe a 10.5. I even saw a 9.2, I think, and I was shocked. Um, so, all that to say, one of the things that Cortex needs to do is it needs to be able to understand all of your data. And when I started building Cortex, I started building Cortex off of the 2023.1 demo data. It was the currently released version of Cherwell. It was the latest version of Cherwell that I could get access to. I think like the day I downloaded it, 2023.3 was released. Oh well, there haven't been changes to the database from 2023.1 onward. And the structure of the database looks exactly the same. Um, and as far as I can tell, the configuration, the defs are basically unchanged. Nothing shocking that Cortex can't deal with. I've run Cortex on 2024 dot whatever databases, and it runs totally fine. So since Cortex was very first built, 2023.1 and beyond were supported. Um, I realized that there was a column that was added. I don't know if it's 2023.1 or shortly before then, uh, that was breaking on some earlier databases. So I wasn't using that column anyway. I took that out of Cortex. Cortex no longer depends on that particular column. I don't even remember what the column was named, again, because I'm not using it. Um, but my goal is to go as far back as I need to. And for a while, I was saying that Cortex supported 10 dot whatever and beyond. Technically, Cortex supported 9.7 and beyond. There were reasons for that, um, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I do want to double down on Cortex absolutely does support 10.0, I'll say, and beyond. Right now, Cortex 1.5 supports 10.0 and beyond. However, seeing this data, seeing the versions that people are running, it's become obvious that's not good enough. I need to support versions further back. And I will say I have an 8.1 demo czar that I've been playing around with, and I had to make a couple tweaks in order to support that data. It turned out that I actually had to use some of those tweaks to support databases that had ostensibly been upgraded all the way up to 10.5, 10 dot something, possibly even a 2023 dot something version. But somehow the configuration was still uh, formatted in a way that it had been back in the 8 dot whatever days when the database was first created. That's not supposed to be the case. Every time you do an upgrade in Cherwell, it's supposed to perform the upgrades to the formatting and the structure of the configuration so that it looks like the newer versions. Um, Cherwell is very forgiving, and because it has been implemented and iterated on for the last 2 decades, um, it does still take into account some of the old configuration. So if the new configuration doesn't exist, it falls back to the old configuration. Obviously, Cortex being brand new and only having new examples initially to go off of, um, it only expected the new configuration. But gradually, I'm removing that limitation, um, and the 8.1, I think it's an 8.1, not 8.2 czar, has been extremely helpful, and I'm making progress on uh, getting that so that it actually looks right in Cortex. It looks the same way that it did in Cherwell back in the 8.1 days, and even looks the way in Cortex as it would in Cherwell if it were installed in the 8.1 days and then upgraded to 2023.1, 2023.3, something like that. So I mentioned that I was going to say why the 10.0 milestone or the 9.7 milestone is important. So it turns out that in the 9, well, You all who have been using Cherwell for a while probably already know this, but in the 9.x days, there were two, I thought there were three, but there were two major changes that Cherwell experienced during that time frame. The first one was globalization. There were some changes made to the structure of the database tables, the structure of the definitions themselves to uh, allow for the customization of the UI between different languages, so that the same definitions could uh, have information specific to the US culture versus the German culture, and you could flip between them as necessary, and it would pick up the right information. Um, Primarily translations, um, but in some cases, it extended to placement of controls on forms, sometimes motivated by the length of words. You know, German words are sometimes considerably longer than English words, so you can't lay things out quite the same way necessarily. Um, so now, one caveat on that: globalization is something that is patented. Cherwell hold file a patent on that. Avanti owns the patent on that. So anything in Cortex, I'm not handling anything related to globalization. Um, I just need to react to how the definition is structured, depending on whether it was created prior to globalization or post globalization. Basically, there are some hard coded things in there so that I'm not, um, running afoul of anything that I'm not supposed to do. There's probably more detail that I'm supposed to give in a YouTube video, but anyway, um, the second major change, which actually built on top of some of the pieces that went into globalization, um, was adaptive layouts. So uh, you could, I forget what version it was, starting in 9 dot something, you could have different layouts for different sized screens. I'm not doing any of that in Cortex. I am picking the largest layout and laying it out exactly the size that it's supposed to be. I think that's the maximum width, maybe the minimum width. I don't remember. I'm basically taking that size canvas and then laying things out across that size screen. The idea being that that's the form that shows the most information. That's probably what you're going to be wanting, what you want to see from an audit historical lookup perspective. So that's how Cortex does things there. Um, so in the 9 dot something timeframe is when those two changes took effect. So later 9.x releases and data works with Cortex totally fine. Prior to that, is still in the works. Like I said, I'm working from an 8.1 database, um, and I'm getting pretty close to it looking the way it's supposed to. I will say, um, the longer, the further away from when the content was created that we are, the more variability is there, the more potential for error there is. So it becomes extremely helpful to actually run Cortex on your data. Um, and that can work a multitude of different ways. Obviously, you can download Cortex from the releases site, linked down in the description, and you can run it yourself on a backup of your data. If you don't want to do that and you want to basically ask me how Cortex is working on your data, I can work from either a structure and lookup czar, that's the best option, or a structure only czar. Structure only gets a bit rocky. Obviously, in both cases, I have to create kind of dummy data um, in some of the tables so that I can see like what an incident looks like. Obviously, I can't see a form if I don't have a record to work from. That's not an issue. I just create dummy data in the database after I've restored the czar, and I see what it looks like. That is also a strategy that can work. If you run into issues, let's say you install it on your own machines and you see what it looks like. If you run into issues, um, obviously, I will fix things. I want to fix things. I want all of your data to render properly in Cortex, especially now realizing that you're all running significantly older versions of Cherwell than I thought you were. Um, I kind of have to change my approach. Um, the best way to get me the information that I need in order to make those changes is, again, the structure and lookups are, or in a pinch, the structure onlys are. Um, and that's going to be the main focus of 1.6 and likely 1.7 as well. Cortex 1.6 and Cortex 1.7 is going to be making it work on older versions of Cherwell databases. So I know the video is getting long, but to summarize, 1.6 will be finishing up the one-step internals, the one-step construction feature, figuring out a good approach to handle external data, and improving support of older databases, specifically without requiring that they be upgraded with a newer version of Cherwell. So even if uh, you could, regardless, you can use an old content version. If you started, on a very old version of Cherwell and just upgraded it through to whatever version of Cherwell you're on. But even if you've never upgraded to 2023.1, 10.5, whatever, um, I still want Cortex to be able to support that. That's a lot. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, shoot me an email, schedule some time with me. Thanks for watching. And I promise we'll be back very, very soon with some actual demos, not just me talking. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. And maybe in the Cortex users group tomorrow.